Well, good morning, everybody. Here's my plan for the forecast video today. After we get through some of the recent weather just here in the last 24 hours or so, we're going to walk into a bit about the tropics. We've seen a model increase in the frequency of tropical cyclone development over the next 10 days, but I want to talk to you about the whole season. I think it's important we learn something from this, or I learned something from this, and tell you about it. So there's going to be several tabs in through here that are about the tropics. So if you don't care, just skip past them and get on to the other part of the forecast video. We'll do our normal multi-model walkthrough. I want to talk to you a bit about where I think things are shaping up getting into the month of September and beyond. And at the end, we're going to talk a bit about South America. And along the way, I do want to mention last couple of days in the comments, I've read a lot about folks asking about this Atlantic La Nina feature. And I just thought we would have a quick discussion about that as well today. So this first animation here you've been watching is just satellite data. I love starting off with this. It's just a right way, I think, to start a video to look at what just happened. And honestly, the big storms that rolled right through parts of the Ohio River Valley, back here into parts of Missouri, the continued convection and cloud cover that's across parts of the South, getting some heavier rains into central Texas, which has really needed this rain, just continues. This is, again, just on the tail end of a front. We just watched deeper convection pull into Texas. Southwest monsoonal flow is still there, but honestly, I was watching so much yesterday of what was going on here coming out of Montana into parts of Alberta where there was snow right into this area, into Montana, Alberta, British Columbia, and we watched this just massive, low for this time of year. That's a deep low for this time of year, curling up here early this morning and continuing to move off to these. But the storms out ahead of it were sizable, to say the least. You can also see on the backside the smoke from the wildfires in Idaho. And I want to just take you there and show you this. So we're going to look at this a couple different ways. We're going to take this top view, this more northerly view first, and we can just watch that deep low roll through and then the convection. Watch it just pop right here in this frontal boundary. Again, the last 3 days have featured some very, very large storms in parts of the upper Midwest, the Dakotas, including the Northern Plains, of course. But as you look at this and we watch this low just spiral up here, take a look at the wildfire smoke in Ontario and also the smoke here coming through Idaho. And I want to go look at the smoke in Idaho a little bit more closely. So let me take you back to yesterday. Very strong winds, especially in the low to mid levels of the atmosphere, coming straight out of the west around the backside of this low, just pushing this smoke quickly off to the east. It certainly covered some of the Snake River Valley here and moved into parts of Wyoming and Montana. And this is again a fire we've been watching for most of this month, just being reinvigorated here today by stronger winds from a different direction. If you remember, most of this month we saw winds really blowing that smoke farther to the north, and now of course it's coming straight out of the west. So just thought it'd be good to just walk through some satellite data before we look at some of these other numbers here. The storms over the last 7 days have been hailers. We've seen a lot of hail and straight line wind damage. And just looking here across the country, this will be what some of my new mapping style looks like. And I can't wait to release the new website to you. I worked a lot on it last weekend. I believe I'll have it done this week in this Labor Day weekend, just getting 3 days to kind of finalize it. But just look at the hail we saw across the country here. And if we zoom in on the upper Midwest and the Corn Belt area, again, some of these storms just dropping a large hail hitting some key acres at a critical time of year. I mean, it's the end of the growing season. So to see more damage like this occurring is just, it's not what you want to see. And it's amazing to see so much bad weather. I mean, we had straight line wind damage. Remember the mesoscale convective system that rolled through Minnesota? I mean, this is a prime part of our growing area in the Midwest. We saw the hail back farther to the west and the stronger storms here. In fact, when I got home last night, Champaign, we had branches down in the yard from the storms that rolled through here. And I didn't see a lot of damage to the crops, but still a lot of adverse and severe weather. And still, it's amazing that I think all the markets end up seeing out of this is just the precipitation. So over the last 7 days, this is what the total rainfall has looked like across the country. So I just wanted to give you that map just as something to think through here. Now, what's really kind of front of mind for me in the near term is kind of the miss on my part on this hurricane season. And while we're watching, remember I said we're going to watch a deep wave leave Africa, and we got to watch the scattered tropical convection out ahead of it. That's what the story's been for about the last couple of weeks. This is about the time that this was going to take off. I've been honestly just disappointed in my forecasting ability of this season. I thought August was going to have way more activity than it did. I think a lot of us did, and I thought it'd be good for me to just learn something about it and share that with you here. So here we go. The newest forecast, now this was made at 1:30. Let's see if they've given an update to this yet. Okay, they did. Got the 7:35 a.m. update now. That's Eastern time. And they've now bumped this up to a 40% chance of developing. So we did know that we were expecting something to be coming out of the central Atlantic. Remember, the MJO was moving over toward Australia, meaning the lid was going to be coming off of the upper level subsidence in this area. That just means we're going to be allowing for storms to get deeper. That was the big idea here. And now we can see two different events, one here and here, taking off over the next 10 days. And I'm most concerned about this one, getting anything here into the Gulf of Mexico. That's always been a concern given how ripe the conditions are in the Gulf of Mexico. As you can see, though, the spread is enormous on where this particular feature could possibly go. But if we just look at it one more time, this is just the probability of getting a tropical depression to form over the next 10 days. And so there now seems to be better evidence that something's going to get going here pretty soon. But honestly, here we are forecasting out to September the 8th. That's just 4 to 7 days away from the peak of the hurricane season. And we're still kind of sitting here. What have we made it through? The letter E? Ernesto, was that the last one? And we're, that's not what we were all expecting. Certainly not what I was expecting. So I thought it'd be interesting just to dive into this just for a moment. So if you don't care about the tropics, get past it. Get all the way over here and we'll start talking about just straight up U.S. weather again. So we were watching several components, right? We knew that there was going to be a La Niña trying to get going, and it's there. We knew that the Atlantic Ocean temperatures were very, very warm. We expected lower wind shear in this area. In other words, we were not expecting the storms, anything that formed, would be kind of sheared to pieces. We knew we'd be dealing with some early season Saharan dust. At times it was quite thick. But overall, these ingredients often point toward a very active hurricane season. And that was our forecast, right? That was what we conveyed. So I started looking at a few of the pieces to this because this is also quite good. The Bermuda High was in place. Look at that flow coming around. And therefore, we knew that anything that came off of the Alpha of Africa had a better chance of being pushed in this direction. We've looked at this particular map several times in the last few videos, just at where the Pacific High is and the Bermuda High is, what's going on with the trade winds. But, that was a feature that made a lot of sense to tell you that this was going to be a hurricane season that was going to get going. So what we waited on for most of August, which is what you're looking here, was for the MJO to leave Africa and start to move farther to the east. Because while it sat here, you just need to think about this as air going up and down. We have easily rising air here, so it's just coming out of the board, and then we had, or out of the screen here, and then we had a lot of subsidence in this area, so going into the screen there. So what you need to remember here is it's all about getting air to rise, correct? So if we can get the air to rise easily, it's going to blow up into big tropical thunderstorms this time of year. But we were unable to get that because for most of August, there was a lot of sinking motion in the atmosphere in this area. So that was one of the factors working against this. Secondly, I was very curious about this. I looked at the mid-levels of the atmosphere and I looked at temperature. Now, in order to get, really good thunderstorm to form, you want it to be hot at the surface and very, very cold aloft. Like that was yesterday in North Dakota, right? Very hot at the surface and very cold aloft. The front sweeps through and just initiates the storms, nothing suppressing them, and they just explode. Well, in this particular case, at the mid-levels of the atmosphere, about 500 millibars, the air temperature anomalies, so differences from normal, a lot of the Atlantic, especially in through here, has been very warm. So you have a hot ocean surface, but you have hot temperatures aloft. And the very warm air aloft, continued. It's all the way up there at 300 millibars. So what this means is with all this warmer air aloft, we weren't building in instability. So instability is when you have heat at the surface, cold aloft, the atmosphere overturns. How does it overturn? It overturns with convection. What's convection? That's just storms, right? But if you don't have the cool air aloft, I think it's harder for the atmosphere to overturn. You combine that with the suppression, which we saw in the MJO, and then the dust, and at times very dry air, and we've just shut it down. And I think as we went through the last month, I saw pieces of that showing up, but I never saw very clearly how warm the upper atmosphere is over this part of the Atlantic. If you go back to hyperactive years like 2005, all of this was cool aloft, very cool aloft. So we had no trouble getting big storms to form. And the MJO, it sat here, meaning that we were able to get, we should be able to get rising motion in this area without much trouble. So I think that's the lesson I'm going to take away from this. Those other components are just as powerful as the ones we typically talk about. And you can actually see it in this graphic. And I honestly should have been looking at this much more often. This is vertical instability. So this is where normal is. And look how much farther below normal we have been. So we need to be, we would need to see this line tracking much closer to average. And instead it's quite below average. On top of that, when we look at the shear values, normally when there is a La Niña going, the wind shear values are low here. But you can see, if you just look, these are the lower values, these are the higher. We would expect to see more of these blue colors in this area, rather than having these much higher wind shear vectors. And I think these are the things that just kind of tore this all apart. So our shear throughout much of August, look at that, was much above average. And as a result, anytime a tropical thunderstorm began to go, it looked more like the type that we get over land, which is under high shear environments. So individual storms were huge, but they were never able to gather, release their heat into a local area, drop the pressure, begin to rotate. That just didn't happen out in the open, out here in the open Atlantic, But we still have all of this to go. And that's the rest of September and half of October, most of October, before the shear just normally increases as we work our way into mid to late fall. And that's a reminder of where you are in the hurricane season. We're still here. So if you just look at it, put a little arrow there to kind of denote where we are, the peak of the hurricane season is still, let's call it 15 days away. And then we have the whole second half of the hurricane season, which we typically think of it lasting, it's late into the month of October. So if those conditions begin to ripen better, we take the upper level lid off, we bring the humidity levels back, we stop the Saharan dust, we get the upper atmosphere cooling off a bit, then it will go. And right now we are, paying attention to one system rolling through there. But there's one other piece of this I want to talk to you about because many of you have been asking about it. So if we kind of zoom in here and look, you notice a few moments ago we talked about the stronger trade winds coming in this direction, but there's some cooler water here showing up as well. And while I don't think I have to go look this up, it's maybe been a little bit too long since I've read a paper on it, but we don't typically call this an Atlantic La Niña when the trade winds are faster there, but you can see that there's stronger trade winds here and stronger trade winds there. And again, what is La Niña? La Niña is when the trade winds get going strong. That's it. I mean, that's the initialization of a La Niña. The ocean temperatures respond to that. The atmospheric circulation responds to that. And in a nutshell, in very simple terms, as La Niña gets going, which it's trying to do right now, we tend to weaken the westerly winds both in the northern and southern hemisphere. That's the big idea. El Niño's the opposite. These winds are slow, and the westerlies in both hemispheres are very strong. So we start to look over here and say, well, I see some stronger winds in this area. But that's more a part of a circulation which we call the Atlantic meridional mode. You see, when the Atlantic meridional mode is very positive, we expect to have very warm ocean temperatures here, which we do, right? And there's a little bit cooler ocean temperatures there, which we have right now. So if we just take a look, this is what happens when the positive phase of the Atlantic meridional mode is going on. There's even a little bit of a weak La Niña signal, and look, we have that. All those pieces I just showed you here. So what I call this feature is just the positive phase of the Atlantic meridional mode, okay? Now, going from there to here, this is what tends to happen. We tend to get stronger winds in August in this area. And we had that. That was the increase in the shear. We also tend to have more meridional winds here, meaning more north-south. That is what made the dry season so very dry in Brazil. So I think several things are coming into place with the Atlantic meridional mode controlling this. And what typically happens going forward is that if we look at the August surface pressure, it tends to drop in this area and raise and build in that region. So this is important for South American weather. I'll show you why in a second. And this is very important for the tropical season here, which we expect to get going now that these other variables are beginning to let off. The wind shear one and the instability hopefully building, okay, and the MJO moving around. So I mentioned South America. Why is it so critical? Because if we are going to drop the pressure here and get hurricanes going later, August, September, October, well, what is that going to do when we get down to South America? And this is the piece that's this is tricky for me, and I'm not sure that I've convinced myself of this yet. In September and October, those are critical months for planting, early planting for soybeans in September, but the prime planting month of soybeans for October. There tends to be a negative correlation represented in these colors with precipitation rate, meaning that we tend to be wetter down here and drier. I'll put a D over the top of it into that area, a little bit wetter in this corner. Now, this is going against what the current European model is predicting. I've been showing you this, that they are saying, and I'll show you this at the end, that the European model has been saying that by the time we get to the end of September and start October, better rains are expected to come into this area. But if the Atlantic meridional mode dominates, then that model forecast is too wet. Now, we're going to watch it regardless, because sometimes we see a lot of, especially market behavior, happen on the forecast and not on reality. But I'm saying that possibly the model could be too aggressive on forecasting the wetter start in this area. That is what you need to take away from this. So I just wanted to kind of explain myself a bit, or explain to myself in front of you what was going on with this hurricane season and why I've missed it, and then maybe just something to be on the lookout for as we go forward, with the fact that there is this very unique, very positive Atlantic meridional mode feature. Okay, let's come back to the states now. For those of you that skipped over that, this is where I want you to pick back up. Here's our deep low this morning, and it's continuing to roll right along the U.S.-Canada border, very well forecast by some of the models yesterday. We continue to see the heavier rains, but very narrow areas around this. And there's been some scattered storms to the south, but we're going to be basically watching where that low goes in the front that's associated with it. So this morning, looking at our all hazards weather map just a hair after 6 a.m., we do have some dense fog. We have some air quality issues where the heat was just oppressive yesterday in the mid-south. We still have we have heat advisories out. And here in Montana and Idaho, we have a frost advisory, a freeze warning, a winter weather advisory, and air quality alert. All of that in this small stretch here of these counties. So taking that and going forward, let's take a look first at the severe weather risk today. Storm Prediction Center's got a lot of Minnesota, part of Wisconsin, and Iowa under the risk of the stronger storms. And again, that's as the frontal boundary comes through. Tomorrow, that front presses farther to the east. I'm a bit bummed about this one because it's my daughter's first performance this year for band, and we'll be at the football game, and I think that front's going to hit right about that time where I live here just outside of Champaign. So that's me personally forecasting there. But day 3, this moves into northeast. So as we look out there at the high-res NAM, which I actually think was decently initialized this morning, let's watch that low curl up as the deeper convection continues this afternoon and this evening across a broad area of the south. So you can see the storms here. Again, this is all supplied on that tropical moisture. The low moved here. The frontal boundary tonight is going to be largely in that region. So we're going to keep an eye tonight starting 5, 6 o'clock on the risk of these stronger storms connecting up with the southwest monsoonal flow. Isolated showers and storms farther to the east. So that's Thursday night tonight. Let's get now into the overnight hours, get you into early Friday morning. We're going to park it right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, what will be interesting is to see if this frontal boundary kind of runs out of its ideal conditions by the early afternoon and what it ends up hitting by the evening, because it shows by 7 o'clock on that evening, the frontal boundary is sitting right in through here. And that is where the storms are expected to show up tomorrow, with the risk of the strongest ones being in this area of our Midwest, getting toward the Great Lakes. A lot of isolated storms farther to the south and here across the east as well. So that is through Friday night. Getting into Saturday morning, we can still see the low spinning up here, delivering more rain into parts of Texas, eastern Texas, and Louisiana. But by midday on Saturday, much cooler air dives in, and we've got the frontal boundary continuing to press toward the east, where the heat will still be on. Now, what I'm curious about is how much of this rain is going to come through and help with these soil moisture deficits right now. Understanding that at this stage for the crops that are in these areas, as rain falls, they tend to grab it and transpire it pretty quickly. So I don't imagine we'll see a major change in the soil moisture values as it stands. And, we've been watching all week long, what's going on with the Mississippi River, given that the Ohio Basin is pretty dry at this stage. So just a couple of areas to be on the lookout for here. But as I go forward, this is the this is the WPC forecast for the next 7 days. So it's got the frontal boundary coming through. There's that lull, right? But then the storm's firing up later in the day here. Heaviest rains down here along the Texas-Louisiana coast. Better chances for rain getting into the southeast, into the Appalachian Mountains, and heavy rains into central Texas beyond that. 7-day NBM, 10-day NBM. 7-day artificial intelligence forecast, 10-day artificial intelligence, which really increases the rainfall chances here. This is the European 7-day, European 10. So again, 7 to 10. We're going to be watching the potential for something coming through here at that point. And then we'll look next at the GFS 7 and 10. And if you'd notice, there's one pretty consistent thing, and that is a lot of wet weather in this area spreading into the southeast. Better chances of rain getting into some dry, very dry parts as we looked at yesterday throughout Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Better chances at least. So I want to give you just a sense on the timing of this, GFS versus the European. We've watched that low curl up dropping its front through right there. This is now getting into Saturday. But watching the European model, how much wet weather we continue to bring into this area. Again, starting today, tomorrow, but going through the weekend into early next week. And what's going on here is a big area of high pressure dives in. You can see the isobars here. That's going to cool things off. But there's still just plenty of air, moist air, running into the southern side of this, which is why we keep seeing these storms down here. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not a whole lot coming through much of the rest of the country, but down south we're expecting it to stay rather wet. Once we get way out there about 9-7, 9-8, the models are attempting to bring something through here with the tropical system, meaning we need to keep an eye on that through that first week of September. Okay, probability-wise, this is the best chance at grabbing an inch. So the colors here represent the probability of an inch. Let's drop this down to the drier areas. Should get a new model run. There it is. Now we'll blow that back out to 10 days. These are the drier areas. So again, that front kind of skipping over this area is going to be critical to watch because we know behind it's going to be some drier air moving in. So this is the chance at staying under a ½ inch. In the really dry areas, that's under a 1/10 of an inch now. Okay. From here, let's go look at week 2. Now during week 2, we do expect to see the jet stream just kind of living in a broader ridge fashion out of the west into the Midwest. So wetter along the Gulf Coast, but drier here in the western half of the country and the northern half of the country, the Canadian Prairie, this whole region. That's also echoed in the new European model forecast. That is the day 8 through 14 European, so it's September 5th to the 12th, and the same thing for the GFS ensemble. So we can see out here much drier conditions are expected during that time frame. Now, the heat. We're going to watch this heat change quite a bit after all of the very hot conditions that we've seen over the last couple of days here. Much cooler air is coming in very, very soon. So that temperature change is going to be quite dramatic for many in the Midwest. Here is Thursday's highs, another oppressive day for heat in this section of the country. We get into Friday, still hot in the Ohio Valley, but the front's clearing. There it comes through, so possibly a 20-degree drop in temperatures. But Saturday getting into Sunday and Monday, much cooler air coming through. Still no major risk of frost with this. This is now Tuesday, Wednesday. And this will be, I think, what the pattern's going to look like for a while. And the reason for that is because by the time we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, we're watching trough here, trough there, little weak trough in the middle, but overall the pattern's just open to higher pressure for the most part. And we'll need to watch this to see as it rolls through. Again, when are we talking about? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Did you see it? That little weak wave that just passed through this region for better chances of storms next week. But overall, where do we not see big ridges? Alaska. And I've been harping on that every forecast video. But the more you see troughs of low pressure here that extend, all the way down to this part of the Pacific, there'll be a ridge there. And that is going to prevent any risk of a very, very early frost if this forecast verifies through the first 10, 12 days of September. So that's why the day 5 through 10 looks like that, and the day 10 through 15 looks like this. So yes, cooler in this area, but I do not see a major risk of frost at this point. That same forecast is also echoed by the European. That's day 5 through 10 and today 10 through 15. So let's wrap this up with a couple of longer term ideas and talk about South America. I did notice that, excuse me, in the new CFSV2 model, this is their week 3, week 4. Much above average temperatures in Canada. That is not a recipe for frost for the Midwest. I'm thinking a lot about the Midwest right now, just because I know how far behind crops are here. And what do you not see? We still don't see a major buildup of heat in Alaska. So that suggests we could get through a lot of September without that major risk. The European model has got something similar. Let me go back to the pressure outlook. This would be the 30 days from the 12th of September to the 12th of October. Again, we're keeping lower pressure overall in Alaska. We do expect the tropical season to get going. That's why when we look kind of globally at the precipitation here, that 30 days, look at this. We're expecting more activity in through here. But zooming in on the United States, that is this is kind of our early fall outlook on precipitation. We are expecting some drier conditions in through this area, but an active hurricane season is still very much a possibility. I will wonder if the Canadian Prairie will, in fact, have a wetter fall. That will be a interesting point to be on the lookout for here. But temperature-wise, I know you know what this is going to look like. It's just mild, very mild forecast from the European model. It's been mild all summer, just what it's been doing. So from there, let's go talk about South America. Again, this is what some of my new maps will look like. I find them to be just a better, more consistent. I also have all of the states in here that you can easily see in Brazil. The dry season is still very much on. No expected precipitation here. A little bit farther in southern Brazil, down into Argentina, wetter conditions. But it's still winter here, don't forget. So we're waiting on spring warmth. We're waiting on planting conditions to begin to show up. From there, let me go back to this, switch you over to South America. Over the next 30 days, expected to be cooler than normal. But again, you look out there at the 30-day precip anomalies, and this is the big thing I'm going to question. Why is the model going over wetter here? Is it truly starting to draw a stronger bit of flow coming around with a normal monsoonal start? Or is that Atlantic meridional mode going to suppress this more than the model's currently picking up on? I think that's going to be critical. That's the most critical piece of this forecast if you're looking at the markets at this point, is if the European model is in fact right about this forecast through mid-October being wetter than average. That'll be what we have to watch. But the other place I want to watch, just quickly here to finish this up, is we do have this powerful typhoon that is on the southern tip of Japan, and it will be there for the next 3, 4, now 5 days, spinning in this area. Massive flooding threat down there. And I will be on my new website showing you a bunch of international maps all over the world. So you can look at any part of the world you want. And the current initial map cluster I've made is most of the basic variables. And you'll notice that here in this part of Japan, they're expecting over 250 millimeters of rainfall. So this is 10 inches of rain. And that's a lot of rainfall expected out of this system coming through there. Okay, that's all I'm going to do today. I'll pick this up again tomorrow with one last video before we get into a bit of a longer weekend. And I'm going to stop here. I appreciate your extra attention today. We'll talk soon. Thanks.